Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
Buck Sexton here on the EIB today. Very pleased as always to get a chance to sit in for the one and only Rush. Thank you for joining me. It's late in the summer. I hope you've had a good summer. Summer almost coming to an end. Usually this time of year things slow down a bit in the news cycle, but not today. We've actually got a bunch of things to talk about. You know, the journalists disappear all of a sudden. They go to Nantucket and the Vineyard, head out east, which, if you're from the coast here, is a cool way of saying the Hamptons. They also go out to, I don't know, the Maryland Shore, if you're in the D.C. area. I don't know where the journalists around there hang out, something like that. So I have no idea where everybody else in the D.C. area goes. But they go to fancy places. But the news cycle, such as it is continuing on. Big thing today, Donald Trump going down to Mexico. He is going to go hang out. He's going to have a sit-down with President Enrique Peña Nieto. Apologies if any of my Spanish pronunciation is off. I somehow managed to take French, German, and Arabic in school and not a day of Spanish. I don't know how that went down. I didn't want to. I guess I didn't want to be in a French restaurant and be ordering these steak frites. But short of that, there's really not a whole lot you can do with French in this country. You can sound a bit fancy sometime, maybe, perhaps a little bit, but it's not the most useful. Probably would have been more useful to learn some Spanish. So President Enrique Peña Nieto, he is going to sit down with Trump. They're going to talk about a whole host of issues. Something that I always think about when we look at Mexico in the context of what the Democrats are trying to achieve here, because I know first everybody's talking about, well, how outrageous this is for Trump. That's a first part of this we have to go through a bit. There's outrage in Mexico. You can even do a quick look through the headlines if you want. You'll see it yourself. Mexico is outraged collectively that Donald Trump would go down and speak to them. The media is outraged collectively that Donald Trump would go down to Mexico and speak to the president. It's fascinating to watch, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum. You've noticed something. No matter what Donald Trump does, it's terrible and hateful when the media reports on it. No matter what he does. He's either too extreme or he's unprincipled. He's either not pivoting as he said he would, or he's pivoting. Or he's crazy, he's racist, or when he does outreach to minorities, it's not in good faith, it's not effective, they don't listen to him, so then he shouldn't do outreach. It doesn't matter what he does, they hate him. And maybe you don't like him, maybe you're a never-Trumper, maybe you're a stalwart constitutional conservative who wants to vote Evan McMullen or something, whatever the case may be, or do a write-in. Maybe you want to write in Buck Sexton, I don't know, that could be kind of fun. I get like 2 or 3 votes. I could get my mom to vote for me. That would be cool. In this election year, crazier things have happened. But you'll notice that no matter what Trump does, I think to put the Mexico visit in context, I want to talk a bit about the Mexico policy here, or rather policies of immigration that Trump is going to be discussing. And it's also trade and a whole bunch of other issues that get piled onto this. But Trump acts like a calculating politician on this one. Right? You could say opportunistic, and somehow the media always finds a way to bash him. He was too hard line on immigration, and then he started to shift on immigration, and then he's a liar. You'll notice Hillary doesn't lie. She misremembers. She evolves. She shifts. But never lies. It's never cynical. It's never pandering. It's never just anything to stand with her, or I'm with her, or whatever the slogan is. I don't know. Be ready for Hillary. But if you want to know why the Democrats care so much about immigration, all you have to do is look at the data, such as it is, on how Democrats, or rather how newly arrived immigrants or recent immigrants tend to vote. And they vote overwhelmingly for the Democratic Party. And there are very clearly efforts underway to change the electoral map in this country by giving the vote to as many illegals as possible. Now, I know people say, oh, no, they're not talking permanent legal status, not necessarily citizenship. I hope nobody believes that that's what the Democrats that they'll stop there. They clearly won't. They want a permanent majority. That's what's at stake here. And that's why, as you've seen, President Obama has tried to sort of move the football down the field with deferred action for childhood arrivals and with DACA and with DAPA, I believe, are the two acronyms. That's right. And he's tried to do what he can as an executive, overreaching, really usurping legislative authority, deciding that Congress is kind of this anachronistic, boring old thing with a bunch of boring old dudes in it who don't really matter anymore. All we need is a president who knows how to get things done, has a pen and a phone. If they get the amnesty that they want, and make no mistake about it, that is what they want, there's no way that you can have a Republican in the next few elections, perhaps the next couple of generations, win a national election. It's all over. They know that. If we're talking about what the stakes are, these are the stakes. Democrats clearly understand that. And as Donald Trump's down there talking to President Peña Nieto, keep in mind that the PRI, the Institutional Revolutionary Party of Mexico, was the only party that won an election, only national level party that won an election in Mexico for, I think it was about 70 years. You see, we tend to think of power in this country as transferring back and forth between both sides, right? One side messes up for a while, the other side comes in. One side isn't doing a good enough job, at least the other side is a legitimate opposition. But in plenty of places that do have elections, that have either parliaments or some version of their own Congress, or in plenty of places where there's a form of democracy or they have their own version of democracy going on, there's really only one choice. And in Mexico, historically, the choice was the Revolutionary Party, now called the Institutional Revolutionary Party, originally the National Revolutionary Party. Point here being that Democrats can look to the South and see a model for what they would like to achieve with one-party rule in this country. So as we sit here and talk about and think about the implications of Donald Trump, what he's saying on immigration, his ideas, building the wall. The wall's crazy, they say. We'll talk about how crazy it is. As we discuss that, understand that the Democrats' plan here is to essentially overwhelm the system, or to take the map such as it is of registered voters and add a few million to the Democratic side of the ledger, and that's ballgame. That's it. Look at the last few elections and look at what the differences have been in terms of what victory was versus defeat. And you'll see that if you legalize, keep in mind, by the way, with legalization, of course, comes chain migration. So it's not even just the 11 million that they officially say are here. I think the number is obviously higher than that. I don't know what it is. I do know that it's been 11 million for about a decade now. I also know that people who think themselves quite fancy will go and say, well, net migration from Mexico has been zero because the economy has slowed down, and this is over the last few years, or whatever the case may be. And then you can always point out to them, well, yeah, but then there's that whole issue of other illegal immigrants coming through Mexico, specifically from Central America. We saw that surge happening, tens of thousands that we knew about. I actually just had a conversation recently with a veteran Border Patrol officer, and it was just off. It was an offhanded comment, and sort of I got kind of a laugh out of him. I just asked. I said, we're friends. What's been going on down there at the southern border? You've been stationed down there. Are they accurate on the numbers? He laughs. Of course not. First of all, they don't know what the real numbers are, and second of all, they change the way they count the numbers to make it look better. This administration, very clever, by the way, on that, deciding that a deportation is, we just caught you at the border, now go back to the other side and try again. Under the Obama administration, that's counted as a deportation. Do you think that's a deportation? I don't think so. So they've been lying to you about this issue a lot. They've been misrepresenting their stances on it. All you have to do, by the way, is go to, if you can stomach it, go to Hillary Clinton's official campaign website and see what the Democrats' position on immigration is, And it's just a lot of it's just hugs and rainbows and unicorns and wonderfulness. They just want to just keep all the families together and everything's humane and cuddly. But we're going to uphold the rule of law, she says on this page. They're going to uphold the rule of law by ignoring existing immigration law and by creating a system through their so-called immigration reform that means that everybody can stay. Now, not only can everybody stay, but at that point, the constituency for a close to a de facto open border status will be larger than ever before. Do you think at that point, do you think after a mass legalization, the conversation is going to turn more towards border security or border openness? I think we all know the answer. Now, the Trump campaign is saying that they're not necessarily pivoting on this. I don't know. It changes day in and day out. It's tough for me to defend it or criticize it one way or the other because it changes with the news cycle. He's giving a speech in Phoenix after he visits Mexico. One would think that this kind of outreach to Mexico is exactly the sort of thing that would get members of the media kind of excited. Oh, he's doing outreach. He's pivoting. He said he would, and on this issue, he's pivoting. Of course, the primary reason to vote against Trump that the media has offered to you is that he's a racist. I do not believe Donald Trump is a racist. I don't think that anybody who knows him or his family thinks that he is a racist. He may say things that fall outside the boundaries of acceptable discourse on issues like immigration. That doesn't make him a racist. And in some cases, it just makes him more honest than Hillary Clinton is willing to be about how he feels about immigration issues, because she's, of course, lying. Go back and watch the debate. Well, you won't do this, but I'll just tell you about it, and you can check me on this if you want. If you watch the debates between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, whenever immigration would come up, there was never any sense whatsoever that enforcement was going to happen, that anybody was going to be sent home, and really that they wanted to stop anyone from coming here. They just kind of want to register them. They want to register them to vote Democrat and register them from Obamacare. Oh, by the way, that is on Hillary Clinton's campaign website. They want to sign people up. They want to let families, quote, we should let families, regardless of immigration status, buy into Affordable Care Act exchanges. Illegals buying into Obamacare means illegals getting Obamacare subsidies. And, oh, yeah, that's right. Obamacare is collapsing in a lot of states, but that's perhaps a conversation that we'll have to hold off on for now. We were promised that would not be the case when they were initially ramming through Obamacare without a single Republican vote. We were promised that. And yet here we are. Hillary Clinton saying, no, in fact, that will be our policy. Illegals will get Obamacare, which is subsidized, taxpayer-funded health care. That's right. That's how they're holding this whole thing up, by funneling taxpayer dollars to it. You don't think they're going to get the vote if they legalize all the millions of illegals who are here? You know they will. You know it. Buck Sexton in for Rush Limbaugh. Much more coming. Back in a few. Buck Sexton here in for Rush, 800-282-2882. Kevin in Orange County, what's up, my friend? You're on the Rush Limbaugh Show.
Hey, Buck, it's great to be on your show. This is from the beginning listener, first-time caller. Thank you for taking Russ's place today. It's an honor.
Thank you, sir.
Are you there?
Yes, Kevin. We're waiting for you to shed light on the world for us. Go ahead.
I'm going to... Okay. I live in the OC, but I'm a surfer. I have a house down in Mexico. I go surfing down there. So I have lots of friends.
Nice. Hang 10. I like it.
When I saw Vicente Fox on TV this morning, I couldn't help him. I couldn't stand it. They hate him down. They hate that guy down there. Nobody supports that guy because he threw everybody down the bus. But anyway, long story short, all these politicos down there, and the PRI is the original cartel, man. That's where the cartels learned to cartel at. That was cartel school, is the PRI. But anyway, they're scared to death of the wall. They're terrified of the wall because it cuts off the gravy. They don't care about whether illegals up here get to be paid system or not. So long as they, send MoneyGram money back from Walmart. Billions back to Walmart that no taxes were paid on,
Oh, the remittances is something that's very rarely talked about. I think it's about $15 to $20 billion a year is the estimate of just just U.S. cash getting sent south of the border. It's a huge.
This is real easy. Here's how Mexico pays for the wall. Oh, you guys didn't pay any money on that cash. You got paid on that construction job that you sent through Walmart back to Mexico. Oh, you can't write a check for it? You have no proof of funds? Oh, there's a 10% tax now on that. Totally fair, right? By the way, when you take a refrigerator down to your cousin or your nephew in Tijuana or Ensenada, they hit you for 16%. Fair is fair, right?
Yeah, look, I've read on the Trump website, he talks about this on his official campaign website. And Kevin, thanks for calling in from Orange County. I hope you catch some wicked. Is it a curl? Is that when you're on the wave with the? I know nothing about surfing. I know that cowabunga, which the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles used to say, is a surfing term, I believe, but that's all that I know. Look, the Trump campaign, we're talking about I think they say $5 billion is what they think the fence will cost, which I'm pretty sure, the Pentagon spends that on pencils every year. So, it's not really, yeah, that's right. I'll go there. This is a lot of $5 billion. For this government, $5 billion is not a big deal. I think the estimate for Medicare and Medicaid fraud every year, is in the 60 to 80 billion range. So there's that. $5 billion. This is all about optics. This is an issue of a gesture for Mexico. Could we raise the funds by doing something to sort of stop remittances or tax remittances? Could we have some sort of import-export tax? Is there a way that you could raise $5 billion? Yeah, you probably could. Does it really matter? No. Is it saying that Mexico is going to build a wall more about getting the base fired up than the economics of building walls? Yes, I think it is. But walls are not crazy. Walls actually do work, and we could, if we want to go the historical route, we could talk about the Great Wall of China. It's a rather large wall meant to keep out invading forces. That was a while ago, though. You could say, Buck, technology's gotten better now. Now people can fly over walls. They can overstay visas. But a huge problem. About 500,000 visa overstays last year, which is why that has to be addressed. How do you address that? Well, E-Verify is a very good start. But a wall would certainly be effective in some regard. It would be useful. And people who think that a wall is crazy should probably stop and explain that to countries that are built. When I say wall, I mean a barrier of some kind, a fence, a wall, something that stops people from just walking or driving across. And there's the unfinished U.S. Mexico border wall / fence / nothing. But some European countries recently, because of the migrant crisis, have started to build some walls. The Saudis to keep out the Yemenis and the problems there on the Arabian Peninsula. They're building walls. There's quite a bit of wall that's been popping up all over the world. The Economist actually has a pretty interesting infographic on this. There's a fence / DMZ wall area between North and South Korea. Not easy to get between India and Pakistan because of barriers and fences and things. And they will enforce that, of course, with lethal measures as well. The Greeks have been building fences and walls because of the migrant crisis. Hungary's built a fence. I believe even one of the Scandinavian countries recently has started to be like, maybe a fence isn't such a bad idea. The Western Sahara has had a fence for a long time. Uzbekistan, trying to keep out Kyrgyzstan and Afghanistan, is like, you know what? We've got a fence. A lot of places have fences. Good fences make good neighbors. Buck Sexton in for Rush. More coming. Buck Sexton here in for Rush on the Rush Limbaugh Show. We are joined now by my friend John Schindler. He is formerly of the National Security Agency, the NSA. Currently, he is a writer with the Observer, the New York Observer. You can go to observer.com to read his latest. We talk about Hillary and Russia. John, great to have you as always.
Hello.
What's up, John? John? Do we have John? We had John. I think we lost John, which means that we'll probably get John back in a second. This is live radio. Crazy things happen in this world that we live in. I mean, I'm not going to say that the Russians may have hacked into our phone lines and kicked Schindler off, but it's definitely a distinct possibility. But for some reason, I can't hear Mr. Schindler, so I don't know what to say about that other than He's not. John, are you there, buddy?
I am right here.
There we go. Hey, party time. What's up, John?
I am in the middle of a Florida hurricane, but go ahead.
Oh, gosh. Sorry to...
Well, not exactly hurricane. Bad weather.
Okay, bad weather. Fair enough. All right, well, we lost you for a second. I was happy to blame the Kremlin, but you're telling me that it's actually Mother Nature instead of...
Who knows these days?
Instead of Putin. Although maybe Putin controls Mother Nature. Everyone's been talking, John, about how Trump has all these Russia connections. We've even had former senior government figures out there saying that they think that... he's an unwitting agent of the Russians and all that. But the Hillary Russia connections are fascinating and are getting much less attention. Walk us through some of those.
Yeah, I mean, look, Trump's connections to the Russians are kind of overt. I mean, he's not really bothering to hide them. Hillary has them too, and the Clintons, as they're Clintons, are a little better at hiding them, but we really do need to talk about them. Of course, this being the Clintons, the nexus with Moscow is about money, fundamentally. We've known for a while that John Podesta, her campaign chairman, has had some strange ties to Russian corporations. The Podesta Group, the lobbying firm, high-powered Democratic lobbying firm in D.C., he founded with his brother, has taken money from Kremlin sources under the guise of doing lobbying work. But it's actually a lot worse than that. We now know Clinton cash. We now know some of the Clinton Inc.'s links to the Skolkovo Foundation. And this is really important. Skolkovo is a high-tech complex west of Moscow established back in 2009 to be sort of Russia's Silicon Valley. And unlike our Silicon Valley, Skolkovo is actually basically a government enterprise. Putin has massively funded it to develop high technology, and it has close connections with the Russian military and the Russian intelligence services. Unfortunately, the Clinton Foundation seems to have been basically laundering money from corporations, U.S. and other corporations, giving money to Skolkovo that wound up giving the Clinton Foundation many millions of dollars. How many is not clear. At least $6 million, maybe much more. We're just not sure. And the problem is the FBI had already warned American businesses not to deal with Skolkovo because it was basically a front for Russian intelligence. So why is the Clinton Foundation encouraging Cisco, among many other Google, U.S. corporations, to invest in Skolkovo when these are actually also donors to the Clinton Foundation? It's a real mess.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, the public is much less focused on corporate espionage than they are on sort of military and the classic intel espionage that's been going on for, well, as long as people have been trying to gain advantages over their adversaries. But from the Russian point of view, from the Chinese point of view, from really any adversarial country's point of view, if they can get our trade secrets, that's in some cases more valuable, certainly in a dollar and cents sense of the word, or sense of it, than anything that they could get necessarily on the other side. And so this seems like it was a huge opportunity for Russian corporations with ties to Russian intelligence to get access to sensitive U.S. commercial information. Right. And, oh, by the way, the whole time the Clinton Foundation is getting cash from those same entities.
The Russians have been stealing American high technology for a very long time. This is not new. What is new is in the Cold War, they actually had to recruit agents, so-called private firms, just reach out to American counterparts and say, let's do a deal. Well, the problem is the high-tech guys on the Russian side are at least sharing information with Russian intelligence and may actually be Russian intelligence. And Americans are just not very sensitive to all this, whereas Russians are.
Now, the uranium concession, by the way, this comes up a lot when people talk about the Clinton Foundation's shady dealings. What can you tell us about this, about the uranium mining concession that the Clinton Foundation, what's the tie-in there? Oh.
Hello?
Yeah, there we go. And he's back. This is what happens. Phone lines. Are we gone? We're gonna have to try to call him again. It was just getting good too. It was just getting exciting there. We're about to talk uranium. I mean, this is 88 miles per hour plutonium reactor going back in time. We were talking about all kinds of fun stuff, and then Schindler disappeared. I guess it must be very, very heavy rain down in Florida. Also, if we're going to steal some technology, maybe we should steal technology to make the phone companies actually work even when it's raining. That would be kind of cool. You would think that we would be at that point in time. But why don't we? Oh wait, hold on. Oh, we're back with Schindler. I don't hear Schindler, but apparently you can hear Schindler. John, tell us about the uranium mining.
Oh, this is bad stuff, too. Look, the Clinton Foundation was doing deals with Russian firms to sell something like 20% of U.S. uranium to companies that are indirectly or directly controlled by the Kremlin. Remember, in sane countries that have nuclear weapons, uranium is treated like a strategic industry. Certainly the Russians treat it that way. We used to treat it that way. In Bill and Hillary Clinton's America, uranium is something that you sell to the Russians. This is crazy. This is stuff that during the Cold War would have considered essentially treasonous, but this is going on too. Why there aren't congressional investigations about this?
John, I think.
Hello?
Yeah, there we go. Why there aren't congressional investigations?
Yeah, why aren't there? I mean, these are vital nuclear strategic materials that we are letting the Russians have for profit, by the way. Why is that? Who is benefiting from this and why?
Yes. Cui bono, right? Cui bono.
Cui bono. As well, and of course, it's the Clintons, so you know what the cui bono is. It's ultimately about cash and power. Trump's ties to the Kremlin are about his ego as much as anything else, I think, whereas the Clintons are very easy to understand what's going on here.
Right. Trump's ties are more along the lines of, isn't Steven Seagal pretty close with Putin just because?
Oh, yeah. Steven Seagal. Remember, he doesn't get a lot of big deals these days here, so he hangs out in Russia. It's like Gerard Depardieu, the semi-washed-up famous French actor who's taken Russian citizenship and hangs out with Putin. Putin's collecting all these sort of strange, washed-up Western kind of action stars. I joke like the movie The Expendables 37 is going to be set in Crimea. But, you know, I mean, this is, Steven Seagal is one of the many people who has nowhere else to go.
All right. Well, keep an eye on all those Hillary-Russia connections for us, John.
I will for you, Buck. Great
John
to be here,
Schindler,
as always.
formerly of the NSA, currently with the Observer. Read his latest at observer.com. John, thank you very much, sir.
Great, thanks.
All right, team. We've got a whole lot more. Buck Sexton here in for Rush Limbaugh, 800-282-2882. We will be right back. Buck Sexton here in for Rush Limbaugh today on the EIB. You know, if you've missed any portion of Rush's award-winning radio show this week or last, you can catch up by joining the member side of his website, Rush 24/7 at rushlimbaughpodcast.com. Membership includes being able to access archives and podcasts of the last 30 days of his program. Plus, you get the Ditto Cam, which is awesome, live or on demand. You also get access to the Parody Library, a library full of parody. Join today and get a free Never Hillary bumper sticker. I've got one. It's at home. I thought about putting it on my door, but then I realized that it'd get vandalized because I live in New York City. But it's awesome. Look for the yellow join button on rushlimbaughpodcast.com. Go check it out, everybody. Let's take some calls here on the EIB. Kelly in Melbourne, Florida. What's up?
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Oh, well, I'm doing fantastic. Listen, I really want to talk about immigration.
Yes, ma'am.
I am a Latina. I am from Colombia, and I came here legally. It really hurts me economically too. You know, it's not hurting me now, but it's gonna hurt me in the future, right? Because the more illegals, the more refugees we have, the more money and the more taxes we have to pay. Correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I came here legally, and I'm a painter. I just get out of work, and I am thinking to bring my mom to United States legally. I just send her the money to do the visa process. I want to send a message to all of those people and Latinos that are here legally and illegally. We are hard workers, and we came to United States with a purpose. To grow, not to go back, not to do a one step and back forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. I mean, coming here legally shows a willingness to work within the system, and it's your first steps with the United States when you come as a legal immigrant, as you have, are positive and respectful of the rule of law, and are all moving in exactly the right direction.
I mean, yes. And also last week I was working for a veteran, which I think then he's a Democrat. But and he saw my Trump sticker in my car, and he said, you know, then Trump wants you out of here. I said, no, you're wrong, because he don't want me out of here. He want me here legally and paying taxes like the rest of the Americans. All the Americans pay taxes. Why shouldn't I, right?
Yeah, look, I think that this is a message that the Republicans in general and Trump, I wish would, he's got a lot of headwinds from the media in general. Kelly, thank you very much for calling in. I appreciate hearing your perspective. Republicans are the party of legal immigration. I mean, Hillary and the Democrats can't have it both ways. She can't say, and I see right now she's giving a speech in Cincinnati, although I'm not listening to her because we're doing live radio. Hillary can't say they want to respect the rule of law, but they also refuse to break up any families or refuse to deport anybody, because current federal law on immigration says that if you're here illegally, you're not supposed to stay. So she can't have it both ways. And to all of the people who have spent a lot of time and gone through had to jump through all kinds of hoops and dealt with tremendous difficulties to come to the country legally, what does it say to them that those who skip that whole process, it also can be very expensive. I know people have to deal with immigration lawyers and they pay for them themselves, by the way. That tends to be at least the experience that when I speak to legal immigrants as they're going through the process, it doesn't seem to me that there are as many groups that are sort of clamoring, sort of these leftist groups to pay their legal fees as there are for illegals. There are illegals out there who now get invited to State of the Union address, get invited to the DNC to speak on stage. There is a celebration of illegality occurring within the Democratic Party on immigration, and yet they also say they want to uphold the rule of law. Hillary Clinton lauds Barack Obama's centralization of power in the executive branch, going around the Congress to try to say that laws essentially are no longer laws because I say so. And she says she supports that. The Democrats support that as well. Because, well, for one, Hillary can pivot, she can shift, she can change, she can lie, and none of that ever really matters. But the moment that Donald does any of that stuff, we have to hear about it from everyone. And I know some of you probably are not big fans of Donald. I get some sense of that from the social media interaction that I have when I get to sit here on the EIB. But look, I have a very basic principle as a conservative and as a Republican. I refuse to do the enemy's work for them. So I start with that, and I oppose the Democrats. That's where I sit. That's where I stand. Bruce in Indiana. You're on the Rush Limbaugh Show. You're speaking to Buck.
How you doing today, Buck?
Good, sir.
Hey, I think you're kind of missing a point on this visit.
Uh-oh.
And I think the reason that the media and Vicente Fox are so upset about the visit is that it validates how false the polls are, and it validates that, when Hillary's cannot basically fill a high school gym and Trump is filling arena after arena with thousands and thousands of people, that, this just goes to show that President Nieto kind of looks past these fake polls and says, you know what, this is somebody we're going to have to deal with. And so bringing Trump there now kind of, it throws because his whole candidacy was a big joke in the media. You know what I mean? He was supposed to be somebody who was just some figure who was just too far out there and nobody validated and nobody really appreciated, but that's not the case. And so his visit kind of highlights that. That's my opinion on it.
We'll have to see what Peña Nieto says after this as well. I do think that there's sort of a win for the president of Mexico, and he says, see, the presidential candidate, this right-wing Republican had to come to me, had to sort of kiss the ring and come down here and talk to me in order to appeal to Latino, Hispanic voters in the United States. We'll see what the president of Mexico says. I'm sort of withholding judgment on. And also, by the way, we have to see what Trump says in his immigration speech. It's funny. I've already seen some people saying, "Oh, well, he's stepping on one with the other," and I'm like, under any non-Trump circumstances, meeting with the president of Mexico before you give a major speech on immigration would be seen as savvy statecraft. But when Trump does it, it's like poor messaging. His campaign's in disarray. Oh, my gosh. Did you know he's a racist? I mean, it's just it all gets piled on top of it right away. No one ever thinks about this one. I mean, if Hillary did this, let me ask, if Hillary went down to Mexico before she was going to go give a open borders speech on immigration somewhere, Do you think the media would be saying that it just shows how poorly run her campaign is? I mean, look, Trump does some things that I think aren't very wise, and says some things that I think are not particularly astute. But I don't think everything he says and does is bad, and that's where the media is. I mean, I actually support some of his major positions. So, Bruce, that's where we are, my friend. All right, Bruce, it's been real. Thank you, sir. Yeah, we're going to go into a break here. Buck Sexton in for Rush. We've got a lot more show. Don't go anywhere. Back in a few. I see some old names on the political scene have held on. We have the election the primary, I should say, from Tuesday night. Rubio, McCain, and Wasserman Schultz all rack up some victories. Debbie Wasserman Schultz able to hang on despite all that nonsense, or it's not nonsense, it's just all the malarkey about the DNC trying to do everything they can to make sure that Bernie isn't actually the nominee, because America's not really ready to vote for a Democrat socialist just yet. Hillary may share a lot of Bernie's policies, but she's not going to go out there and call herself a Democrat socialist. She won't do that. But anyway, Rubio, who managed to pull off that primary victory despite getting trounced in his home state by Trump. That was a rough one. And McCain, I feel like the media was pretending, right? Media was pretending that McCain was going to have a tough go of this, but that's just them trying to make a horse race of it. It's late in the summer, Now it's when you start seeing the news stories about, the mama duck that's reunited with the baby ducks in the pond, and everyone's, because there's nothing else they can talk about. But we've got a lot of stuff to talk about here. I got 30 Benghazi-related emails recovered from Hillary's server. Oh, wait, what? I thought she turned over all the emails. My mind is blown. How is this possible? So we got Hillary emails to discuss. We got Clinton Foundation business, Clinton Incorporated, a whole lot more. Stay with me. Indeed, Buck in for Rush today on the EIB. Thank you very much for listening. If you want to call in, 800-282-2882. Got some spots on the phone lines for you. You ever wonder how these community organizers and leftist activist groups get funded? I know that there are some cutouts, and we can talk about Soros, and some of the other folks out there who write big checks and do that sort of thing. But I do wonder, these groups proliferate. There are so many of them, hard to keep track of all of them. And they have money to do things. They have money to pay organizers. They have money to print annoying signs that show up at protests. They do all kinds of stuff. To hire legal counsel, to sue people. They have money coming out of their ears. They got lots of cash. At least some of them do. And when you look at where they're getting the cash, you might be surprised to find out that some of it, at least, is under the guise of helping you, or the guise of helping people who lost money or lost value in their homes, were adversely affected during the mortgage meltdown, the financial crisis, some years ago, back in 2008. So this is what's going on. Wall Street Journal is doing some great reporting here, and it's a little bit, you get a little down in the weeds, and then you find, if you work your way through them, you go, oh, wait a second. So there's this government agency called the Residential Mortgage-Backed Securities Working Group, or the RMBSWG. RMBSWG. I don't think they probably use an acronym, but I thought I'd give it a shot. I used to be in government. We love acronyms. We'd have whole conversations in acronym. We'd make up acronyms for our acronyms. It was awesome. It was like just drowning in alphabet soup all the time. So they have this residential mortgage-backed securities working group that they set up. And it's a long, boring name. Always be concerned. Always be skeptical of government agencies that have long, boring names. You want to be like, why does this thing exist? What is, and it's something like a working group. That sounds so innocuous. It's tough to get people fired up about a working group. What does it do? Well, when you look at it, it's supposed to be all about Main Street relief, right? Because if you buy into the official narrative of how the mortgage meltdown happened, according to most of the media, is that Wall Street got super greedy and Wall Street did really bad things. That is true. But the government played an enormous role in all of that. You don't really, when was the last time you heard about Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac? You hear about that really anymore? About the erosion and then essentially the elimination of the lending standards necessary for mortgages for those institutions and then for any bank. And that was all part of the home ownership society, and that access to credit also became a social justice issue. Do you hear about any of that? No. You watch The Big Short, a very entertaining movie. I read the book as well. It's now available. I think the movie's now on Netflix. Oh, we're talking about some movies third hour, by the way. And there's no mention whatsoever, really, of any of that. You never even hear about the government in this, except to bail out the bankers at the end, because that's the part where everyone gets mad at the government, of course. You don't hear about the change in lending standards, about how this was policy. You don't hear that during the Clinton administration, for example, the federal government would sue banks if they were not doing enough lending in minority predominant areas. You would not hear this. You not hear this now, I mean. They'll not discuss this. This is never a part of it whatsoever. But so they set up this group, the residential, because we've created this enormous boogeyman, right, of all the terrible stuff that Wall Street's evil, Wall Street's evil. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton, who's out there doing her best Bernie Sanders impersonation, let that one sink in for a second. That would be entertaining. I would pay to see it. She's out there doing her Bernie Sanders impersonation, talking about, how Wall Street's bad. Meanwhile, the hedge funders and all the rest of them are throwing cash at her hand over fist. Can't get enough cash into Hillary's hands. And you wonder, it's almost like everybody realizes that this is just something that she's having to pretend to believe and feel in order to fool enough people to vote for her so that it could, of course, be business as usual for the very wealthy and the well-connected of the Democratic Party. That's really the modern mantra of the Democrats, right? The wealthy and the well-connected and the dependent and the underclass, they do well. Everybody else, everybody in the middle, they pay for it all in every sense. They're the ones that get the raw end, the bad end of the deal. But so the mortgage meltdown blamed on the banks, and the banks are the bad guys. Okay, fine. Banks did bad things. That's true. Banks got bailouts. They shouldn't have. All right. We can go past that for a second then into there's a lot of political momentum behind certain groups here. There's a lot of open territory for leftist politicians and perhaps even some attorneys general to make a bit of headway on the issue. And so what do? They create this residential mortgage-backed securities working group, which, as the Wall Street Journal says, is a coalition of federal and state regulators and prosecutors created in 2012 to identify, investigate, and prosecute instances of wrongdoing in the residential-backed securities market. How many bankers do you know of, mortgage brokers, bankers, all the way? How many do you know have gone to jail? No, they're not going to jail. Because then they'd actually be upset. Then there'd be problems, right? Then if Hillary actually hated Wall Street as much as she pretends to, then maybe you would see prosecutions of bankers. You're never going to see prosecutions of any bankers. I mean, not really. One or two guys here or there for insider trading, and that's just to sort of set an example for the rest. But they will shake them down for cash. That's what this is really about. You see, that's when the government shows you what it's all about. They pretend that it's about justice, right? We're going to hold them accountable. Actually, we just want them to write us a fat check. What's the difference between fraud that's $1 million and fraud that's $100 billion? Well, the people that commit $100 billion of fraud, they pay fines. The people that commit $1 million of fraud, they go to prison for a long time, right? And in the case of Wall Street, we see this playing out over and over again. So they create this group that's supposed to right the wrongs of the past, right? This is classic social justice, leftist narrative stuff, right? We're going to help Main Street by going after Wall Street. So what do? They create this group of all these different investigators, prosecutors, and they start getting settlement money. This is the Justice Department now. This is the Department of Justice, that same Justice Department that found nothing worthy of prosecution in Hillary Clinton's whole email scheme, by the way. That one, the one that the Justice Department you know and trust. That same one. They've announced this past April a $5.1 billion settlement with Goldman Sachs, a $3.2 billion settlement with Morgan Stanley, Citigroup paid $7 billion. J.P. Morgan, $13 billion. Bank of America, $16 billion. And there are other banks as well. This all reported on the Wall Street Journal. So many, many billions of dollars from the banks. And you'd say, okay, Buck, but the banks were crooked and Goldman Sachs got 100 cents on the dollar for its obligations to AIG, and it's because of Paulson, and I saw that movie too, and all this other, right? I mean, you could say all this stuff. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree with a lot of it. But this money is supposed to help, as they say, Main Street. It's not just money that they're taking from the banks to punish the banks. That's certainly part of it. It's money that is then going to go to help the people that were hurt in the mortgage meltdown, right? But that's where this all really falls apart. That's where it starts to get very interesting. The Wall Street Journal's analysis of over 80 beneficiaries from Bank of America settlement shows that they received, on average, more than 10% of their 2015 budgets from the bank. So some of these places are getting a really serious chunk of their operating budgets from these bank settlements. But now is where you bust out your shocked face for me, right? Are you ready to just be like, oh, no way, Buck, no way. The money's going to leftist activist groups. Wait, but I thought it was supposed to go to Main Street. I thought if you lost your home because of shady mortgage practices, they're going to hold Wall Street accountable. Hillary's all about Main Street. I mean, she's, lives pretty far from Main Street. She likes mansions and private jets. She's a private jet progressive, but she was going to give the money to the people, right? That's what was supposed to happen here. Big shakedowns of the banks to give money back to those hurt by the banks. No, that's not what's happening. What kind of groups are getting this money? Oh, I don't know. $1.5 million to La Raza. That's one for you. The National Urban League. You go through this and you see, wait a second, there's all of these groups that are favored by Democrats, these community organizer groups. Some of them do voter registration. Some of them do, whatever, community organizers and activists and all that, whatever they're up to these days. And it even gets a little more blatant than that. Illinois' Democratic Attorney General Lisa Madigan got $22.5 million from Morgan Stanley. Again, this is all the DOJ and this consortium from the Residential Mortgage-Backed Securities Working Group. They get this shakedown. They get this $22.5 million from Morgan Stanley, and it goes to, drum roll, her state's pension funds for public sector unions. Public sector unions. Look at that. Oh, I wonder who that helps come election time. So you mean that banks, which people say are Wall Street, but actually most of the banks are in Midtown Manhattan, but that's a side note, that the banks down on Wall Street are going to help Main Street when really politicians just view this as a slush fund for their own interests. That's what this is. And by the way, do you think there's a lot of money? Is any of this money from the banks going to end up with groups that tend to favor limited government, constitutionalism, would use such horrendous terms as, quote, patriot in there? I know patriot, scary stuff. You will recall that the IRS specifically targeted groups with patriot in the name because we can't have any of that patriotism around here. Scary stuff. Do you think that money's finding its way to right-leaning organizations? Of course not. Because all of this sort of social justice rhetoric you hear from the left about the banks is a dodge. It's a smokescreen. It's not what they're really doing. They have created this boogeyman of Wall Street as they take donations. And Hillary is a fantastic example. Look at all the money. We got $25,000 I see here, a ticket for a fundraiser out in the Hamptons. Hello, everybody. Jimmy Buffett performing with Paul McCartney and John Bon Jovi. Let me tell you something. A lot of Wall Street people, not a lot of folks are paying $25,000 a ticket who aren't big-time private equity hedge fund managers, the top of the heap on Wall Street. And they're hanging out in the Hamptons. So they're generally speaking going to be, unless they're flying in the private jet, New York City based. So they love, Hillary loves these rich Wall Street types, loves them. Who else is going to pay her $250,000 for a 30 or 40-minute crap speech? You heard her speak? You think anyone's paying her $250,000 because it's such moving oratory? I don't know. Pericles, she is not. So this is what we have to deal with. No one. This is a perfect example. You're going to hear all about this, by the way, between now and the election, how much Hillary cares about Main Street and how much she cares about the middle class. Meanwhile, middle class is getting crushed by Obamacare. Middle class is supposed to get help from organizations like this, using the force of law, DOJ, shaking down banks. And you could be like, yeah, then maybe they should shake down the banks. I don't know if you're in favor of that or not, but I know you're not psyched about them giving Acorn-like groups and La Raza and whoever else cash from the banks to make sure the Democrats get into office, which is exactly what they're doing. Even shoring up their public pension funds with the cash they take from the banks. That's how they play the game. We should keep that in mind. Buck Sexton here in for Rush. 800-282-2882. We'll be back in a few. Buck Sexton here in for Rush. The Democrats can never find enough private sector entities to shake down under the guise of, I don't know, social justice, righting historical wrongs, you name it. If you got cash, they want it. It's the one thing that government's really good at taking your money. They'll find a way to do it. They're very effective at that. They'll find you. You may recall some months ago, I was thinking about this because we were just discussing the sort of shakedown of the banks, and you have New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman as a part of that. You have more on Mr. Schneiderman and shakedowns, and I have to Holman Jenkins over the Wall Street Journal has been doing great work on both of these issues, both of these areas. So there was some months ago this effort underway to get ExxonMobil to start shelling out cash because it was basically, what did you know about climate change and when did you know it, you know? Because they were lying about their climate change projections or something. This was supposed to be yet another shakedown. You had attorneys general from Massachusetts, the Virgin Islands, and New York State. What's up, Virgin Islands? Why you gotta hate? What's that all about? That was not cool. Well, yeah, they realize it's like, yeah, sure, we'll get it on this scam, right? They're like the guy who's, going along. He's like, he's gonna be a part of the bank robbery, but he's just gonna sit in the car. He's not gonna actually go into the bank. They were like, yeah, we'll come along for that. Why not? So yeah, that was supposed. And you had attorneys general from Vermont, Maryland, and Virginia, Connecticut. They were all sort of considering, or supposed to be. Or supporting this in some way. You had 15 states total, according to the New York Times here. And the idea was that essentially Exxon was lying about climate change, and it was time to hold Exxon accountable. And people were like, wait a second, how can that be? That's going to be criminal. So if Exxon says we think that climate change is X, and a bunch of climatologists say it's Y, now you're going to hold them criminally liable for fraud and demand money from them? Well, that, I can tell you, I can pass along to you happily, is falling apart now. That's going away. It's collapsed. Again, Holman Jenkins, high five over the Wall Street Journal. New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman's investigation of ExxonMobil for climate sins has collapsed due to its own willful dishonesty. The posse of state AGs he pretended to assemble never really materialized. Now his few allies are melting away. This was all under the guise of the hashtag Exxon knew. And this was supposed to be like cigarettes, right? That they internally knew one thing and were publicly saying another. And they were going to throw out all these subpoenas and they were going to go after Exxon. You know what they were going to do with this money, by the way? They were just going to give this to environmentalist groups. This is how they play the game, right? They find a private sector entity. They find some sort of quasi social justice or socialist or Marxist or collectivist entity on the outside that's a nonprofit. And they're like, we're going to take from you and we're going to give it to them so they have more resources to demand more money from you. But this time it looks like it's not going to work. But yeah, they were criminalizing. They were effectively here criminalizing climate change, not even necessarily denial, but disparity between what you internally think as a company versus what you're externally saying. These people are losing it. They are losing it. But unfortunately, they're in positions of power and actually can turn you upside down and shake the change out of your pockets. So the government always exceeds in that. So Schneiderman, AG of New York State here, once again, overplaying his hand. 800-282-2882. Buck Sexton here in for Rush Limbaugh. Show is flying by, but we have a lot more. Stay with me. Indeed, Buck is back with you now. We are also joined by Kim Strassel. She's a member of the Wall Street Journal's editorial board and also author of the fantastic book, The Intimidation Game, How the Left is Silencing Free Speech. Kim, great to have you on again.
It is so great to be here, Buck.
So you wrote a column recently, the U.S. Department of Clinton. You said the latest emails show that the state and the foundation were one seamless entity. Take us through how that is the case.
Yeah, this is what's important over the last week is that we finally came to find out why Hillary Clinton had a private email server. And that kind of got lost. The mainstream media didn't focus on it or didn't have the brass to call it out. But look, all of the focus has been so far on national secrets, security, whether or not she mishandled classified information. And that's very important, and she ought to be held accountable for doing that. But what it misses is that she obviously didn't set up this private server in order to spill American secrets. She set it up for another purpose. Now we have Huma Abedin's emails. Huma Abedin, of course, one of her closest aides who worked with her at the State Department. She, too, had her email correspondence on a private account on Hillary Clinton's server. It's finally come out, and we find out that, in fact, the reason she kept this private server is because it was handling Clinton Foundation business, the same Clinton Foundation business that she promised back during her confirmation hearings that she was going to distance herself from.
They've been claiming ever since this came out that, well, there's, of course, and this is classic, with the Clintons, they have a celebration when they either can say, well, there's no smoking gun or there were no criminal charges filed, which is a pretty low bar on I think, both sides when you're talking about a presidential candidate. I mean, not once, but twice now, it seems, Hillary Clinton avoiding criminal legal jeopardy as cause for celebration inside the Clinton camp. But the appearance of corruption is bad enough, or should be bad enough, I think, to give a lot of voters and a lot of people across the country some serious concerns here. She was meeting with people who were disproportionately donors to the foundation, wasn't she?
Oh, yeah. We have all kinds of evidence of that now because of the Abedin emails. We know that Doug Band, who was a senior executive at the Clinton Foundation, was in constant contact with Huma Abedin when she was at the State Department. And just by an aside, by the way, Huma Abedin managed to somehow pull off a deal where she worked both at the Foundation and at the State Department simultaneously. But we have, for instance, emails with Doug Band saying, hey, can you get a meeting with the Crown Prince of Bahrain, with the Secretary of State? And by the way, he's a big supporter of ours. So, that is just Doug Band flat out saying, this guy gave us millions of dollars and you need to arrange for him to get in to see the Secretary of State. And we know that meeting happened. We have the foundation reaching out and asking for big name foundation donors to get into a lunch the State Department was having with the Chinese president and asking to be seated, moreover, with Vice President Biden. We're still not clear whether or not that happened. But the requests were pouring in, and I think, to me, reading through all of these Abedin emails, the extraordinary thing is just the familiarity between Band and Abedin. These are not emails in which people even bother to say, hello, Mr. Band, or formerly yours, or goodbye, but these are just guys who are clearly, working for the same enterprise, Hillary Clinton, and they just send these 2 or 3 word emails back to each other constantly, all about, adjoining schedules and keeping track of Hillary's business.
Now, as somebody who used to work for the federal government, Kimberly, and dealt with the ethical constraints and regulations they put on the rest of us are insane, especially inside the intelligence community. I know in your book, The Intimidation Game, you talk about some of the witch hunts that were underway in Wisconsin, trying to get at Scott Walker and using the John Doe laws there to do these dawn raids on people because of the possibility of collusion between a campaign and outside entities. In fact, there was one woman there who was criminally prosecuted for using her phone inside of a government building. I remember the case. That was up in Wisconsin as well. It seems like for everybody else, the laws aren't just harsh. The laws are instituted in such a way that the partisanship of all of this becomes very obvious, right? I mean, it seems like the left is willing to use ethical constraints or ethical boundaries to hammer people on the right, and it's always a one-way street. And Hillary, to me, is just the biggest example of that.
Yeah, extraordinary. Look what they did in Wisconsin, which you just mentioned. Look what they did with the IRS. Look what they've done to free market groups in terms of Senate investigations or boycotts of companies. And yet now I think is indeed the time to take another look back at James Comey and what he's allowed to go on here. He obviously faced a great deal of criticism for letting her skate on this question of mishandling classified information. But I think in light of these Abaddon emails, he needs to get called out on something else, which is, look, the FBI was clearly in possession of all of these emails showing this back and forth between the State Department and the Clinton Foundation. And I can tell you, this is the same FBI that has gone out of its way in recent years to pursue these almost overzealous public corruption cases. I mean, think about all the different names. Former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell, former Alaska Senator Ted Stevens, Bob Menendez up in New Jersey. And they brought these prosecutions on evidence that's far less startling than what we see in these emails. So here the FBI is sitting on all of this information, and it just doesn't even bother to pursue it. It's kind of an amazing thing, and he ought to be asked about that, because that certainly has not been his modus operandi in the past. Jim Comey is the sort of guy who will pursue his targets down any rabbit hole he can get them on. And if Hillary Clinton were being treated like a normal citizen, you can bet that there would be a very sweeping investigation at the moment into questions of pay for play.
The Bob McDonnell case is fascinating to me, by the way, because there you have in the Clinton sort of escape hatch with all this stuff is you can't prove. I mean, you can insinuate, you can draw a pretty clear analysis of it, but you can't prove she did X because she was given Y, right? Essentially, unless we have Hillary with a brown paper bag full of cash under the table on video, nothing's actually going to happen. There's nothing to see here. McDonnell never did any official act when he was in office on behalf of the businessman that had given him sort of loans and other gifts. Never took any official act. He just hung out around him. It looked gross. The state of Virginia chose not to bring any charges. Federal prosecutors went after him and his wife, by the way. And yet the Clintons, there's nothing.
Yeah, and by the way, the court had to overturn that in the end. And I want to be clear that I'm not in favor of overzealous prosecution. But what I am in favor is equal application of investigations, at the very least, to discover whether or not there has been a crime committed, or at least try to pursue that. Add to this, too, Buck, and this is the biggest irony of all, is, you know, when Bob McDonnell did this, they had to go searching for evidence, but at least the evidence was there. They didn't, meaning that they had things that they could go looking at to try to find out if there had been public corruption. One of the reasons that Hillary Clinton can stand there and say all innocently, well, there's no proof that I did anything wrong, is because she deleted 30,000 emails that might have otherwise shown what she'd done.
Not only did she delete them, I think this is also an important, she didn't just click the delete button. Maybe you could say that's fine. She used a special program specifically intended to overwrite the data so it would be irretrievable even by the FBI. I mean, you look at what she did with official public records, and we know these are official public records, and you compare that to the penalties that somebody would possibly face under some of the Dodd-Frank regulations about the destruction of, if you work in finance and you destroy the wrong papers, you can go to prison for like a decade.
Oh, for your life, forever and ever. But, this goes back to your point. The Clintons' bar on whether or not they can be held account to anything is whether or not they committed a felony and that it can be proved. I mean, it's an extraordinary bar, low one, as you say, when, in fact, if you just step back from this, what we do know is that this is a woman who said she was going to sever ties with the foundation, and she didn't, who said many statements about her email and her server, which we know were out-and-out lies, who clearly conducted Clinton Foundation business on the side while she was there. We know that donors had access to her, and she deleted emails that clearly were related to work. These are all things that ought to be a disqualifier for office, but because the media often is always making excuses for her, it's extraordinary reading the New York Times and other places that keep saying, well, look, there's no real evidence she did anything wrong here. And they keep talking about how, well, the Clintons probably ought to sever their ties a little bit more with the Clinton Foundation. All of that is missing the bigger point about what we've already caught her doing and how it ought to be a disqualifier.
And how is it that they can say and write in the same paragraph, say in the same sentence, the Hillary defenders, whether it's the New York Times or any of the other outlets that are out there, that nothing unethical was really done, but yeah, maybe now she should stop taking all those donations from foreign countries. If foreign donations to the Clinton Foundation if they're bad now or will be bad soon in the future, they were bad before.
Yes, and moreover, this idea that it's okay to do it if and only when she wins the White House, that's in essence like saying, get your checks in now, folks. Hurry up. Your last-minute chance to influence the future president of the United States. I bet the Clinton Foundation right now can't even keep up with all the donors that are trying to get their dollars in.
Yeah, they got to get in while the getting is good. That looks like the case. Kim Strassel is on the Wall Street Journal's editorial board. You can read her latest at wallstreetjournal.com. And also check out her book. It's out now, The Intimidation Game, How the Left is Silencing Free Speech. Kim, always great to have you. Thank you for calling in.
Thanks, Buck.
Buck in for Rush, 888-282-2882. So much more show and some more time. Stay with me. Buck Sexton here in for Rush Limbaugh today on the Excellence in Broadcasting Network. Someone explained this one to me. Riddle me this one. 30 Benghazi-related emails have been recovered from Hillary's server. They were not in the batch she turned over to the State Department. I just mentioned this before. I was trying to find the name of the program used. Remember what Hillary's whole thing of, what, you mean wipe it like with a cloth? No, not with a cloth, with a program that specifically overwrites data such that it can never be recovered. I mean, this is the sort of thing you would do if you were running, I don't know, some kind of an espionage operation. You'd want to make sure that you left no trace. Really into making sure nobody could. But the server was secure, they say. But they had to use the special program to erase all the stuff. But nobody hacked into it. But somebody hacked into it. But no foreigners hacked into it. But we don't know if they hacked. So you go down this thing and you're like, this is all. It is such a mess. What a tangled web Hillary weaves when first she has practiced to deceive, and she's been doing that for about 30 some odd years now, probably longer, really. 30 Benghazi-related emails. Many of you, I'm sure, work for companies where you have to keep email, and at some point, perhaps there's either there'll be some kind of a lawsuit, or just for purposes of disclosure, discovery. I don't know, whatever. I mean, I've been in places where this has had to have been done. You do keyword searches, right, through your emails to find something. Hey, can you get me all of the stuff we've got on, Anacott Steel. And Wall Street reference, you got the movie, not the bad guys. Great movie, by the way. That was before Oliver Stone was. Yeah, he's made a Snowden movie now too. He's got to stop with this stuff. I am not going to go see that. No, it's really important that Edward Snowden make sure that he. See, the thing is, they'll tell you on the one hand that he's released all this. His defenders will say he released all this information that was necessary for transparency, and then you'll say, "Well, wait, what did he release?" And like, "Oh, we can't. He didn't. He released a very small percentage of what he has. Anyway, that's all. I don't believe any of that, and we don't need releasing anything about any foreign intelligence operations, any collection in foreign countries is not a constitutional issue. It is." Treason. It is very, very bad. I know, it's crazy, right? Who would have thought? And I got distracted. They're talking about, Oliver Stone. Yeah, he had made some decent movies back in the day, Wall Street being one of them. Anyway, you're looking for emails about anything. You do a keyword search. The easiest way to make it just sort of pop up. And you'd think that anything with Benghazi in it, if you're Hillary Clinton and you're like taking it upon yourself to be the arbiter of what is work-related versus what is personal, if you're separating out those two things, I feel like Benghazi is going to be something where you're pretty clearly in the work category, right? It's not like, hey, what's up? Party in Benghazi next Thursday. Who's coming? Like, I'm pretty sure if Benghazi's in the email, it had to do with your work as Secretary of State. Therefore, it should have been turned over. And I think it's pretty obvious, you know? I don't think she was writing emails to Hillary at any point in her presidency. It's like, hey, I hear Benghazi's lovely this time of year. Maybe we should, all go on vacay. So 30 of those emails now found, despite the fact that Hillary tried to wipe the server clean, not with a cloth, but with an advanced erasing program, a program meant to make sure they would be irretrievable. Why would somebody do that? Why go through all the trouble? If they're unclassified, if they're, if it's NBD, no big deal, nothing to see here. You'd think that maybe you just sort of let them sit there on your server like all the rest of us. Unless you got something to hide. And very clearly, Hillary has all kinds of stuff that she's trying to hide here. All sorts of things that she doesn't want the public to know about. Here's what's depressing, though. I'm going to have to strap in for this one. This is going to make me sad. This is going to give me the sadness on the inside. No matter what they find in Hillary's emails, Democrats won't care. A lot of independents won't care either. No matter what. It doesn't matter. We could find an email. Next week, email could come out. Hillary saying, oh, they gave millions to the foundation. I'll push this through in the State Department right away. That could happen next week. Maybe you'd see like a 2%, 3% drop in the polls. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe not. Because Trump is such a racist. Oh, God, he's so racist. That's all anybody cares about anymore. Hillary there's nothing that could be found in Hillary's emails. I think there are people even, and some of them have jobs at places like MSNBC. There are people who, Hillary could be like, hey, what's up, foreign dictator? Here are the nuclear codes just in case you want them. People be like, but was he really going to use them? It's not like he had access, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. What's up, mullahs in Tehran? Let's all be friends. Check out this batch of sensitive diplomatic information that you would love to read. People be like, it's just Hillary doing business. She's a business lady, And so charitable, I might add. So charitable. She cares so much about the children. Anybody who believes that, don't listen to anything else they say. It's a good rule of thumb. Buck Sexton in for Rush. Much more. Stay with me. Buck in for El Rushbo today here on the EIB. We're going to be talking about some pop culture, some movies, and some other fun stuff coming up here in the third hour, which means it's a great time if you don't want to have a big fight about Trump, never Trump, maybe Trump, or if we just want to sit here and talk about how terrible Hillary is. You want to talk about some other stuff, 800-282-2882. It's not Friday, but it'll be sort of like an almost like open line third hour. We'll be taking a number of your calls as we go through. We have some fun guests joining as well to talk about a fantastic film and a wonderful initiative to create more fantastic films. How's that for a promo and a segue and all that other radio talk stuff that we do here? All right, I'll be right back. Third hour here on the EIB. Buck Sexton in for Rush in the big chair today. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for staying with me if you've been listening through. Phone lines open, 800-282-2882. So there's an argument that you'll hear out there from the pro-Trumpers, the maybe-Trumpers, the quasi-Trumpers, the half-Trumpers, as I call them. Those are the ones that'll say, well, I might personally vote for him. I'm just not going to advocate publicly. And, of course, the never-Trumpers, and I don't know. It's a lot of fun we can have with all these different terms. But one of the big arguments that keeps getting batted back and forth between them, and by the way, we're about to turn this into a discussion about what President Obama has done, not about what you or anyone else should do for the election, because I said we'd move on. One of the big points is, well, the Supreme Court. What about the Supreme Court? Hillary's going to get at least one and more like a couple of picks on the Supreme Court, and that will change the balance of the court. As you know, tragically, Supreme Court Justice Scalia died earlier this year. You have Merrick Garland's nomination sort of sitting in confirmation limbo. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. Republicans have said it's not going to happen, as is their prerogative, despite all of the gnashing of teeth in the media, all the sadness about Merrick Garland, he's so qualified. Oh, no, what will we do? There's a problem already. And this should factor into your thinking about whether a Clinton presidency is something from which conservatism, the Republican Party, some of you might even say the country, could bounce back from, or from which it could bounce back. And that is that President Obama has already done a tremendous amount to change the judiciary. And this has gotten not that much reporting. I see Fox is running a big story on it today on foxnews.com. I've been talking about it for many, many months because, as you see, some of the biggest impediments that, or really the only impediments that Obama has come up against when it comes to his executive actions, right? Those things that he has instituted because he says so, more or less, including on immigration, most notably. It's gotten jammed up in the courts, and the federal courts look at this, and they are a check on the executive branch, or at least on executive branch actions. And so those lower federal courts really matter a lot. They have a big impact on what the executive branch of the federal government can get away with, what it can do. And what this piece on Fox is pointing out, and what I've been trying to sort of ring the alarm bell about for quite some time, is that Obama has already transformed the judiciary in the image of a leftist. He has already created a much more left-leaning federal judiciary. And as you know, because of the federal government's interpretation of, well, you could take it all the way back to Wickard v. Filburn and the Interstate Commerce Clause, the federal government more or less thinks that everything of any importance falls under its purview now. States don't really get to determine. There's nothing that states are left to determine for themselves of any consequence that the federal government wishes it could determine for them. I think that's a pretty fair way of putting this. There might be some exceptions, but more or less, the federal government always finds a way to put its finger into things, to get involved in things, to tip the balance one way or the other, and in some cases to completely dominate an issue that you would think otherwise would be left to the states, right? I know this is sounding a little kind of getting down into the wonkier side maybe of the judiciary, but here's why it matters so much. 329 federal judges appointed during Obama's term. All of them are lifetime appointments. So these judges will be with us for a long time. They'll be passing down decisions from the bench for decades, in some cases, decades to come. And the shift has been dramatic, right? When Obama took office, there were 3 appellate courts that had more Democrat-appointed judges than Republican-appointed judges. Now, 9 of the 13 circuits do. So Democrats were 3 for 13 after Obama. They're 9 for 13 on the very courts that get first crack at executive overreach. Oh, wait a second. You mean that if there's a Hillary presidency and she does stuff that she doesn't have the authority to do under the Constitution, the very courts that are really the only stopgap between those executive actions and them being implemented, those courts have already been politicized deeply? Yeah. That's exactly what I'm saying here. And she might then, of course, get to have the ultimate stopgap of having the Supreme Court side with her on all of these issues. So the judiciary effectively, as a break on Hillary's power, will be gone by the time, once she gets a couple of Supreme Court nominees in there, it's completely gone. And even before then, Obama has handed over to her a federal court system that is packed and stacked. It is racked and ready to go with leftists, with progressives, with people who will side with the Democrats, who will politicize their decisions. And you can say, oh, well, how do you know? Don't Republicans play the same game? Okay, a couple things. First of all, no. That's the short answer to it. Because Republicans mess up. Look at Supreme Court nominees. Look at some of the people that the Republican presidents have put on the bench. They sometimes end up being leftists. You're like, wait a second. Find me a Democrat in recent Democrat president who has put a real conservative on the bench, or even a sort of a centrist conservative on the bench. Doesn't happen, right? Democrats give you Sotomayor and Ginsburg and Kagan, and Democrats don't mess around, right? On judges, they go all in on the left. Republicans are, we don't want to politicize the bench, and they get all wimpy on this stuff sometimes. Some are even saying, maybe Merrick Garland's the best we can get. Maybe we should go with it. Yeah, that's great. Just go with Merrick Garland now and hope. That's a Republican point of view, right? That's the sort of surrender. We only advance in reverse. That's a problem that goes well beyond their judicial appointments. But so we know that the left and the right doesn't play this game the same way, and that GOP will put forward a Republican president, because we know history. We see who they put on the bench. We know that there's a very good chance that Republicans will mess up on this. But then there's a more important side of this. Yeah, President George H.W. Bush, he gave a suitor. Thanks for that. Well played, H.W. So, yeah, a leftist just decided to put him in there. And you also hear conservatives sometimes talk about the balance of the court. The left doesn't care about the balance of the court. They want dominance of the court. That's what they're going for. But see, so you have the different mentality aspect of it. That's one thing. And if maybe you don't buy that argument, and I don't know why you wouldn't, but let's just say you don't, for whatever reason. Maybe you're like, who is this crazy kid in New York spouting all this stuff about the judiciary? And I believe the Supreme Court's non-politicized. I actually can't even say it with a straight face, but let's assume that's what you think. You'll notice something else that happened that got attention at the time, and then it sort of slipped out of the media's the media's attention span. It fell off the radar. People didn't seem to really care quite as much. Remember the whole thing about the nuclear option? You remember that, right? Harry Reid decided that judges, not for the Supreme Court, but judges, lower court judges, appellate court judges, would just be a straight up or down vote, and 51 gets it done, right? Change the rules of the Senate to do this. So you'd say to yourself, oh, yeah, that's right. So not only does the left understand that they play hardball with judicial nominees and the right plays t-ball, which can be fun, even for adults after a few beers, I'm just saying. But on top of that, the kind of judges that the Obama administration has been able to get through, it's just been rubber stamped for federal courts, right? Because they've been able to force through some of these nominees. They changed the rules of the Senate to force through some of these nominees. So they understand the stakes. They understand what's at play here. And they've, as I've said, they've even altered the very rules of the game itself because they're so dedicated to making sure that they can get certain judges appointed who, and depending on, of course, there's the D.C. Court of Appeals, very important. It's considered the most important one below the Supreme Court. If they have the judiciary on their side and Hillary's in charge of the executive branch, she's going to say, of course, she has a mandate. I mean, I'm holding right here in my hand that Clinton is just as unpopular as Trump with voters. This is from Politico, which tends to obviously be favorable to Hillary. That's putting it mildly. But she has terrible negatives. A lot of people don't like her. Even people who favor her policies don't trust her. Because how could you? I could sit here. We could do a whole hour of just playing audio of Hillary being like, oh, I'm lying about this and I'm lying about that and blah, blah. We could do that for an entire hour, but I've got other things I want to talk to you about. No one can disagree with that, by the way, that there's plenty of audio out there. We could just have discussions about all of the many, many lies of Hillary Clinton. You know, whether it's about the emails or about landing under sniper fire in Bosnia or any other number of things I could sit here and talk about. In fact, the late, great Christopher Hitchens even wrote a book, No One Left to Lie to, about the Clintons. Still very worthwhile read today, I might add. He just goes through how they just lie. They just lie all the time, and no people who like them don't seem to really care. Whatever they have to lie about is fine. Depends on the meaning of the word is. I mean, they are so... Oh, the Clintons get me upset. But you think Hillary is going to pretend that she has to reach out to the center and that she has to moderate her positions on things? No, of course not. Despite the very high negatives, despite the poll numbers, all of that, she's going to claim that she has a mandate. She's going to be telling the American people, well, I won. I believe it was Obama who said elections have consequences. I won. And she's going to do whatever she wants to do. And there'll be a judiciary. Fine. I mean, right now there's only 8 and she needs to get one appointed. But once the Supreme Court leans left, given what's happened at the lower courts as well, who's going to stand in the way of what happens when the Congress passes a law that says one thing and Hillary says another? Who wins? Will she force a constitutional crisis on the country? I'm sure she will at some point. And then it just turns into, well, what is the media convinces everybody that the executive branch should get its way because, well, the president, man, or in this case, woman, that's what they'll do. This is pretty scary stuff. This is the slow but sure erosion of the checks and balances that are supposed to make the whole thing work. And it's taken the progressives about 100 years to get here. They must be pretty excited about the whole thing. Hillary doesn't seem as progressive these days as she used to because it doesn't benefit her, but she was an Alinskyite disciple. So there's that. Keep that in mind. 800-282-2882. Buck Sexton in for Rush. We will be right back. Buck Sexton here in on the EIB. I promised we would take some calls, and so we shall. Ronnie in North Carolina. You're on the Rush Limbaugh Show. You're speaking to Buck. What's up?
Hello?
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 Yes, Ronnie, you're on national radio. What's on your mind?
Buck, thank you very much for taking my call. I will appreciate it. I'm going to get right to the point because I know there's other people behind me, so I'm going to talk a little fast. When I lived in Boston, Massachusetts, and I worked at a restaurant, we had a lot of Chinese kitchen help. Not actually Chinese, of all sorts of Asians. And that was in the mid-'70s to the late '70s, during and after Vietnam. There would be a call to the manager of the restaurant letting him know INS was coming through. The manager would walk in the back, yell for a green card. Those who didn't hold up a green card, you could go grab the jacket, and he would write him a check. They would be back in the kitchen in 3 days. I moved to North Carolina in '82. I couldn't stay in the restaurant business anymore. I went to a horse farm. I became manager of the horse farm in 4 months. At the horse farm in North Carolina, I learned that the manufacturers, the farms, the chicken houses, INS would show up, go through, get all the illegals that did not have green cards. They were immediately put in handcuffs. They were taken to RDU airport, and they even showed it on TV, and they would send them back home. I just think it's absolutely amazing that the people that came to Ellis Island worked very hard with pen and paper and were able to get those that came in. Those people that came in worked very hard to become what their families are now and have the rights that they have now. Those great-grandchildren think they're entitled. I don't understand. Why? And Carter put it true that it was depending on which state that wanted to deport could deport. And they actually had it on TV here.
Now, the modern Democratic Party believes, or at least they act as though immigration to the United States is a right. And the moment you take that to its end conclusion, well, then does that mean everybody from anywhere gets to come here? Because if that happens, this place can cease to be what we think of as America pretty quickly, right? There has to be an immigration system in place that has limitations, that also has expectations.
And they're not doing that now. With all of our technology, we can't get these people vetted. Come on, seriously. And other than that, with Hillary Clinton, I thought they were friends, but they aren't friends. They were just associations. They are going to vote for Hillary because she's our woman. We need a woman president. Well, I'll tell you what. I told them they need to go back in the history when she was still Hillary Rodham, 1975 rape case. You can look it up on the internet.
12-year-old girl got raped by a 40-year-old man. They made the 12-year-old girl look like a fool in that court. The 40-year-old man only did 2 months of county jail.
Is this the case where Hillary laughed about it?
Got him off, and then she laughed about it. That child, 12-year-old child, is now 50-something. And if you look it up, towards the end, she contacted TV, newspapers, magazines, radio, and she gave her speech. It ruined her life for the rest of her life by saying at 12 years old she was enamored by an older man.
Look, the media is covering for Hillary. We know it. And on the immigration issue, there's so much dishonesty still, and the Democrats are just talking out of both sides of their mouths all the time on this. Ronnie, thank you for calling in from North Carolina. I appreciate it. Look, they talk. There was a time when you will remember the Obama administration was pretending that they were so harsh on deportations. And then we found out actually that they were just pretending things were deportations that were not. And all of a sudden in his second term, the tune changed very rapidly. And we found out that there were really a few areas where the administration was seeking to transform the country. And most dramatically, I mean, we know from the first term it was health care and with Obamacare, and that happened. And in the second term, you had both the sort of efforts of the EPA to turn into a sort of hyper-regulatory body that could do all kinds of things, including regulating the amount of CO2 in the air, and immigration. If they win on, I think the Democrats figured this out. I always do get the sense that they're playing the long game and Republicans are just too busy in their, intramural squabbles and trying to keep the donor class happy and all the rest of it. Democrats see that if they get health care and then they get the immigration policy that they want, or rather the lack of a policy, really just sort of the more the merrier, that becomes the policy. It's all over and they win. And then they can get everything else they want, because once you have the electorate that you need, well, you don't have to win people over anymore. They'll just vote for what you tell them to vote for. All right, Buck Sexton in for Rush. We got a lot more. Stay with me. Buck here in for Rush. I know El Rushbo himself was here yesterday talking about the movie Greatest, which you can go to, Greater, which you can go to greaterthemovie.com. It is the greatest. It's awesome. But greaterthemovie.com to see more of it. It's in theaters now. It's the story of Brandon Burlsworth, who made his way onto the Arkansas Razorbacks football team. It's an incredible story of dedication and hard work and faith in God. And I was up late last night watching it. It's fantastic, and I would really recommend it to all of you. I know Rush loves it and is telling people to go out and see it now, and you can learn more about it at greaterthemovie.com. We're actually joined now by star of the movie, Neil McDonough. Neil, thank you very much for calling in the Rush Limbaugh program.
Oh, thanks, Buck. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Neil, you were part of this film. It's a great movie. What do you want to tell people listening about why, what was important about this project to you?
Well, people who know me, most of the films that I do, I'm generally playing a not so nice of a character in most of the films that I do. And once in a while I get a shot, like Band of Brothers with Buck Compton, or Captain America, I get my shot at the good guy. And this, I've said it before and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. This is my favorite character that I've ever played, because it's probably closest to me. It's a real human story and a human character. And to have the opportunity to play Marty Burlsworth was such an amazing event in my life. And, for Reve, my kids and myself, my wife Reve, we really loved being part of this and getting to meet the Burlsworth family and getting to, to step into the shoes of Marty Burlsworth. Here's a guy who went through so much, his little brother, who was really kind of like his son, his 17-year gap in age. When his little brother says, who's this chubby little kid, who says, I want to, play for the Arkansas Razorbacks and go to college. No one in his family had ever gone to college in the first place. And to have this kid who was so faith-based, he believed in himself so much, but also, like myself, a devout Catholic, believing God so deeply that he knew that if he stayed the path, great things would happen. And great thing happened for Brandon, and obviously he, was a walk-on to the Razorbacks, became a captain of the Razorbacks, All-American, and then was signed by the Colts, and, 11 days later died in that car crash. And the movie opens up with me dealing with, people coming up to me saying, he's in a better place. And as we all are, as humans are, when we deal with death, it's, what do you mean in a better place? I miss my little brother. And by the end of the film, to realize that he is, in fact, in a better place, because that's what our faith is about. It's an uplifting, amazing journey. And for the audience, we saw it the other night in Los Angeles, and the audience just, they loved it. I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. And by the end, everyone's just cheering because it's such an amazing, uplifting story. And nowadays, you go to the movie theaters, and it's not so much like that anymore. And I miss the days of films where, I can bring, Morgan, my oldest, and Catherine, and London, and Clover, and James, although he's only 2, to the theater and watch that in a really great film. And for other families to bring their kids, they can sit there and watch your film and actually have a discussion about, okay, what's this film about? What does it mean to you? And everyone that I talk to takes something so differently from the film and makes it their own. And it's such an amazing part of my life, and I'm so proud to be part of this film. And the director, David Hunt, what David did was, we didn't have a ton of money, but what we had was faith in this project. And the people from Arkansas backed us 100%. When we said we needed extras in the stands, they came out, and tens of thousands of people would show up and be there for us, because Brennan is such a great story for Arkansas, but now it's such a great story for the world to watch, and I'm just so blessed to have been part of something like this.
I initially thought, this will be somewhat similar in the storyline. I didn't know about Brandon Burlsworth until this movie came out, until Rush was talking about it on air. I thought, it sounds a little bit like Rudy, and then I realized, well, no, actually, not only did he make his way on the team in a sort of under very difficult circumstances, he became a leader of the team. He became an All-American, and also throughout the film, it's clear that not only did he have to have a lot of faith in God and himself, but that faith spills over and inspires the people around him. That seems to be kind of a centerpiece of what the film is trying to convey to audiences.
Yeah, exactly. With my kids, Reve and I try to instill, if you believe in yourself and you have confidence, great things can happen. And with Brandon, there's no way he should have made the team, and for him to not only make the Razorbacks, but to be the captain of the team. And the first day I went filming, Brian, the producer, who's an amazing guy who put all his money behind this and his faith behind this, took me into the Razorback locker room and showed me Brandon's locker that is, plexiglassed up, and, all the stuff is still in there. It's just this shrine to Brandon. And all the other kids who play, in the last 20 years have gone through that stadium, sit in that locker room, and they see Brandon's locker, and they know that something amazing is in that room, and it's Brandon Burlsworth. And this film exemplifies what happens if you have faith in yourself, faith in God, and work hard. That's the other thing. You got to work hard. And boy, did he work hard. And, everyone in this film, David and Brian, myself, and, Chris and Nick Searcy. Nick, when you see the film and you look at Nick, gosh, he was so perfect. He was so great. But everyone was really dialed into it, because we knew we were doing something important, not just, your regular, ordinary films or TV shows that we do a lot of the times. This was important. And everyone, from catering to the grips to the actors to everyone involved, knew that something special was happening. And you look at all the, how we sold out all over the place in Arkansas and in the SEC country. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we're certainly hoping that the rest of the country will get a chance and we'll go out and see it as well. I think the storyline certainly is inspirational across the board. And also to your point about hard work, it seems like these days, you have a lot of professional athletes who are acting in a fashion that some people don't have. Well, it depends on who we're talking about, but some of them act like they're a bunch of brats sometimes, and you professional athletes where it feels like some of them are just gifted, right? They work hard, but they're just gifted. In the case of Brandon Burlsworth, this guy was, athletically speaking, in the opposite category of gifted, but through hard work and dedication was able to become not just a top college athlete, but to go pro. This is the kind of story that if it wasn't true, people would have a hard time believing it.
No, if this wasn't a true story, you'd look at this film and say that's impossible. There's no way some chubby little kid from Arkansas is going to go that far in life. And by the time he was 22 years old, what he had accomplished by 22 years old, if he had just made the Razorbacks, that's one thing. To be a captain of the Razorback, that's another thing. To get 2 degrees while you're at school, that's a whole other thing. And then to make the Colts, and to have that faith the whole way through. That any one of those would be an amazing achievement. But Brennan achieved so many of them, and when he, in all rights, he shouldn't have, but he did, and that's what makes this film so special. And, for Rush to go out on the limb and really speak so highly of it yesterday, and you, Buck, today doing the same thing, it means so much to the community of Arkansas, to everyone who made this film, and to Marty and his family and the Burlsworth Foundation. What you guys have done by giving it that stamp of approval has been such an amazing thing for us, so I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Well, Neil, you did a great job in the film. It's a fantastic project, a very worthy one. I know that everyone here at the EIB is hoping as many of those listening as possible go out and see it. They can go to greaterthemovie.com to look at a trailer for more information, and also to find tickets, right?
That's right, yeah. Go out and see it. If of the millions of listeners that are listening to you today, and again, it's not about, this isn't a film about, let's go out there and let's make as much money as possible. That's not it. It's let's go out and spread the word of this great film so people can actually learn when they go to the theater and talk about issues, and families can go and see a film together. And that's the most important thing. So I hope that everyone listening today just goes out there this weekend and goes and sees the film, because it is one of those films that I've never been this proud of a film in my life, and it's just fantastic. I get choked up every time I talk about it.
The movie is Greater. We're speaking to Neil McDonough, who stars in it. Neil, thank you very much for your time.
Buck, thanks so much. Love you, Bubba. Talk to you soon.
All right, take care. All right, team, we've got more coming. I'll be back in a few. Buck Sexton in for Rush on the EIB. We were just talking about a movie that, first of all, you can go see with the whole family. It's a great film. It's Greater is the name of the movie, and it promotes the sort of values that I think you'd all like to see reflected in entertainment, in the arts, in the creative endeavors that are out there. We want to bring on a guest now who's going to talk about efforts to have more of these films, to get more of them made, and TV shows and other creative projects as well. We're joined by Patrick Reasanover. He heads up the Taliesin Nexus, which he's going to tell us about now. Patrick, thank you for calling in.
Thank you for having me, Buck. And one of my team members at Taliesin Nexus is a member of Team Buck and told me to tell you Shields High.
Oh, Shields High. Yeah, that's what we say on the Buck Sexton Show. Look at that. Hey, all right. Thank you very much for that. So we're a 501c3 based in Los Angeles, Taliesin Nexus. And what we do is exactly what you said. We're focused on talent development. So when it comes to films like Greater, that really explore the values of our culture, those kind of deep human values, and as they relate to liberty, we want to support filmmakers through our internships, workshops, film labs, to help them develop so that we can see hundreds of these films made, every year. And can you tell us about some of the projects that you're either involved in now or hoping to do, or what's in the pipeline? How can people, if they want to see some of the work that the Taliesin Nexus has been involved in, where can they go?
Yeah, well, you can go to talnexus.com, talnexus.com/liberty. And for a limited time, we have some of the films that have been made in our film lab. They're short films, short narrative films, comedy, drama, sci-fi, that explore the ideas of liberty and the practice of liberty through narrative. And so you can go on there and see those now. They're out at film festivals all across the country, so they're not online yet. So you can kind of get a sneak peek. And actually that program, our film lab, is open right now for the second season. So if there's filmmakers out there who are interested in getting involved, it's a really cool program, and the details of it are available on there as well as the application.
And just the name is interesting to me, by the way. Taliesin, as I've been able to find out here on your site, was a 6th century Welsh bard who was credited with preserving the art of storytelling through the Dark Ages.
Yeah, exactly. Taliesin Nexus. Taliesin is the father of storytelling. And so we felt that, that really kind of describes what we are as a nexus or network of storytellers who, share a belief in the importance of the practice of liberty and the ideas of liberty and want to explore it in narrative. And so that describes us, and it describes the kind of filmmakers that we want to bring into our programs and develop.
Are there more? See, when people hear this, I think their first reaction is, other than the ones who are like, oh, great, I want to get involved. But a lot of other folks might say, they're going to run up into all kinds of opposition here. Hollywood's so left, Hollywood's so anti-liberty, so progressive that they're going to come into all kinds of roadblocks. Have you been surprised by how many people in the industry in one capacity or another actually like things like a free society and liberty?
Yeah, I think that, I think part of the problem is this. For folks who really care about these ideas over the past several decades, we've kind of invested in expressing them in the form of like arguments and policy and empirical studies. And for a lot of folks, while that's great work, it doesn't really resonate with the great body of people out there, who really, they think in terms of story and character and heroes, and, that's how they live their life. And, and I believe, these ideas are true and universal and human. And so I think, yes, even in Hollywood, where it may seem kind of dark right now, if we invest in talented filmmakers and just get more people who share these ideas, expressing them in the form of story and making an emotional connection as opposed to just purely an intellectual one, I mean, I think that absolutely they can find a home in Hollywood because, unlike academia, there's no tenure in Hollywood, and Hollywood's a for-profit business. And so, we believe that, filmmakers who are creating content that, are really about heroes, the hero's journey and, individuals overcoming, and not about like a victim complex or, problems with society. We think that those films will resonate with audiences and, and also be profitable.
Yeah.
So yes.
There are good guys, there are bad guys, and people like to see the good guys win. That's a good thing.
Exactly.
I'm with you. All right. Well, people should go check out talnexus.com. The Taliesin Nexus. I'm talking to Patrick Reasonover, who runs this very interesting enterprise. Sir, I wish you all the best of luck with this, and I might have to send you guys a screenplay. I've got some cool ideas. I've got all kinds of ideas.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Patrick. Notice how he wasn't like, yeah, I'll be waiting for it. Patrick, come on, buddy. Just had you on the radio. I got a screenplay or two in me. I'm telling you. Make it happen. Got cool stuff. I was, doing all the counterterrorism stuff back in the day. Maybe Lang will let me tell you a couple of stories. Probably not. So there's that. Actually, no, I can't. I was going to say, I've got what? Like he just assumed, because I'm a news guy, I can't be a creative as well. I'm very creative. I do all kinds of like weird voices and stuff, but just not here on, like Kaiser Wilhelm de Blasio. That's a great series of shorts right there. It's like, clean up all your trash from the streets of New York City. I'm Kaiser Wilhelm. Because Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York City's real name is Warren Wilhelm, for those of you who didn't know that. Side note, we do a whole spoof on Bernie Sanders. These are political ideas, though. We just need good guys and bad guys, I suppose. I got stories about that, too, though. I'm going to go home now and start writing a screenplay. We're going to have the Taliesin Nexus back on when they're making a Buck Sexton original screenplay into a movie. That's right. We're going to call it Shields High. That's actually a pretty awesome name for a project. All right. I'll be back in a few. Stay with me. Buck Sexton here, closing it out for Rush on the EIB. I know, tears all around, sadness. There's a sadness. But there's this awesome guy tomorrow that you're totally going to want to hang out with for 3 hours from 12 to 3 Eastern across the country, named Buck Sexton, who is going to be on the EIB. So if you were like, today's show, you're like, I don't know about this guy. Tomorrow's guy, you're really going to like. Tomorrow's guy has got it locked down. He's crazy. He's a wild man. They cannot contain him. They cannot control him. They can only hope to contain him. Whatever remember that back in the 90s when people had Reebok pumps and those were cool. They should bring those back, by the way. This is a big enough audience. If we wanted to, Reebok pumps. Remember you pump the top of the shoe? Those things were awesome. All right. Well, this is Buck Sexton in for Rush. Send me your thoughts on the various social media platforms and things and such. I'll be back tomorrow. Until then.